Filling in for Stu for this first portion with emergency management. We're going to go over personal safety awareness, and then it's a two-part series. The next part we're going to talk about stop the bleed and about Naloxone. So there is a poll up for everyone. Is the university a safe place? You can pick your choice, yes or no. I'm going to X out of here because I don't want to share what I think. Let everybody else put in their options for the poll. So before we get started, big ones. There we go. Before we get started, we would like to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising of Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Weasley First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, region number 3. All right, so in the first portion of our presentation, we're talking about personal safety awareness. Things we're going to cover is personal safety, having a plan, what that means, what personal safety means, what are some concepts of personal safety. We're going to talk about what to do in the event of an active assailant. It's an active shooter or any other kind of active assailant on campus. We're going to talk about different emergency notification systems we have in place and how you can sign up for them, be informed and be prepared, as well as our building evacuation procedures and other resources that are going to be at your disposal. So here's the question from our poll. Is the University of Calgary a safe place? Well, there we go. Of the 10 people who answered, it looks like 100% think yes, the University of Calgary is a safe place. We're not in a bubble here in the university. We are in a relatively safe place. However, things do still happen on campus. So as you can see here, we have some statistics pulled. Unfortunately, I don't know for the 2021 year to date when that was pulled. It was emergency management who put this presentation together, and that might be from the last couple of weeks or maybe a month or so ago. But if we look at the other dates, 2017, 18, 19, 20, a few of our major stats that we look at: theft on campus, medical emergencies, whether they're injuries or illnesses, mischief and property damage, code of conduct, trespass committed. What that means is people who've been banned from the university showing up here anyway. So things do happen. These rates are fairly low compared to much of the city, but it doesn't mean nothing's happening here on campus. So it's important to be prepared. This is a safe place relative to other campuses of similar size and relative to the surrounding communities. But there's still things that are happening here. So it's important to be prepared and have a plan. And that's what we're going to get into today. So the likelihood of something happening on campus, something major, fairly small, again, compared to other campuses and other communities, fairly small, but things can still happen. And it's important to always be prepared for the worst. Don't always be fearful of the worst. We don't have to walk around scared all the time that there's boogeymen hiding in the shadows and bad things are going to happen. But we need to be prepared for the worst, whether that's just psychologically prepared, we have a plan in our head, or in some cases it's being physically prepared. Things like having a first aid kit on hand, anything along those lines. So a few things you can do to prepare yourself is knowing your emergency instructions for your building. You should be able to find those posted in public spaces like lunchrooms around your facility, wherever you are. What types of emergencies you might face. We're going to get into that in the next few slides here. And what sorts of things you can do to keep yourself safe. So this here on your screen, this is an example of an emergency response plan for a building. This is a generic plan. You'll see a building name with a specific response or a specific assembly point listed there for your building. And this is the response plan for main campus. So if you guys want to have a look at the chat, I think Melanie's going to put up here a link to the emergency management website. And through the emergency management website, you can find generic response plans for all of the campuses. So some things, when you find these, they should be again posted in public areas like the lunchrooms. These are guidelines. They're very good guidelines to follow. But the thing to keep in mind is when bad things are happening, they're usually fluid situations. So we take the very first line on here, in an evacuation, take your coat and keys and identification, your wallet, if they're readily available. It's good advice. But the thing to keep in mind is in a fluid situation, maybe you don't feel comfortable doing that. Maybe you don't think it's necessarily safe to do that. So don't. Do what you need to do in that moment. Trust your instincts and keep yourself safe. But there's lots of good advice here on medical emergencies, fires, suspicious items. One of the items here under medical emergencies, unless you're trained, do not render first aid before trained assistance arrives. Again, situations are fluid. And if you find yourself in the sort of situation where you're not necessarily trained medically to help someone, there's still lots of things that you can be doing. And it's important that we help each other as a community. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing these things. We got to look out for one another. So anything you could do, whether you're just giving someone a warm jacket while they're maybe in medical distress, or making that phone call to 911 or to campus security, those are all important elements, and it's helpful. So just because you're not necessarily trained to do anything medically doesn't mean you can't help. Step up and help. So if you have an opportunity, find these emergency procedures, look through them, just be comfortable with them, and have an idea of what you can do to help protect yourself and the people around you. A few things to keep in mind to keep yourself safe for personal safety. One is if you're leaving work alone, it's good to have a plan. You're going to your vehicle, whether you feel there's a reason that you might not be safe walking your vehicle on this particular day or not. It's always a good idea to be vigilant. For one thing, keep your phone in your pocket. Don't be staring into your screen. Keep your headphones off. Don't be walking around not hearing what's going on around you. You got to pay attention to the world around you when you're walking around campus. Maybe you're leaving work or leaving a study session, and there's somebody else who's going the same way and they're leaving in a couple of minutes. Doesn't hurt to wait for them. Walk with them rather than alone. There's strength in numbers. There's safety in numbers. If that's not an option for you, you can also call campus security. You can reach us at 403-220-5333. We can send safe walk, or if there's no safe walkers available, a campus security member can come and walk with you. It's an option. As far as when you're walking around campus, maybe when you're coming to and from campus, again, if there's anything that you think you might not be necessarily safe, maybe you've made somebody angry on campus, maybe there's domestic violence concerns, whatever might be going on. Another thing you can do to keep yourself a little bit safer is to change up your regular routines. Maybe catch the late bus or the early bus one day. Maybe take a different route, go right around Bio rather than left when you come off the LRT. Just change things up a bit so people aren't watching and necessarily learning patterns. Places like stairwells, parkades, other vulnerable locations, just make sure you're paying attention when you go into these spots where there's dark corners and not a lot of crowds around. If you're in open spaces with lots of people, you're usually a lot safer. But maybe on your route home, you need to walk up a path between houses through a dark alley. That's the times you just want to be paying attention and seeing what's going on around you. Also, if something doesn't feel right, that's okay, and that's your feelings, and that's legitimate feelings, and you need to act on those. So if you see a group of people walking along and you feel uncomfortable with this group of people and you don't want to walk by this group of people, it's okay to cross a street. It's okay to turn around and go the other way. It's okay to walk into a locked building. It's okay to pick up your phone and call someone to come walk with you. Don't be embarrassed about that. It's okay. Building evacuations. If you guys pay attention in the chat, I think Melanie's going to be throwing in a link now to where you can find your evacuation assembly points for each individual building. And the big question for everyone, maybe Jessica, if you can throw up another poll question for us. Do you know where your assembly point is for your building? I'm going to answer this time. I'm going to skew the polls because I just happen to know where my assembly point is. Oh, it's not letting me. We'll get to the answer in a couple of slides here when we get to the actual assembly points. So you might be required to evacuate. Usually, we will let you know that you're required to evacuate by means of the fire alarm. Our fire alarm systems also have voice audible systems throughout them. So if it's not necessarily a fire, you might get emergency notifications that way. But that's usually your cue that it's time to leave. So in the event of a fire alarm, don't panic, stay calm, don't rush, follow the instructions that were on your sheet we had up a moment ago. If you can, grab your coat, your wallet, your keys, and get out, go to your assembly point. Again, only if it's safe to do so, grabbing your stuff. If it's not safe, don't. If you can, close your window, close your office door. What that's going to do is it's going to compartmentalize any fire or chemical leak or whatever's going on. And it's going to make it a lot easier for the fire department to control, and it's going to slow the spread. So you're going to keep everyone else, including yourself, safe by doing that. Follow the instructions that you hear over the intercom with the fire alarm. It says here, use the closest emergency exit. Do not use the elevator. Do not use the elevator part, it's important, but the closest emergency exit, only if that is safe to do so. So if your closest emergency exit will take you through a path of danger, always have that second emergency exit in mind. Always have two ideas of how you can evacuate. So when you look at your emergency evacuation procedures for your floor, it should also list where your exits are, where the stairwells are. You might need to use an alternate route to get out. But if the closest one is available, use it. Go to your assembly point and do not re-enter the building until you've been given the all clear to do so. Sometimes the fire department will ask us to silence the fire alarm. Just because you don't hear the fire alarm anymore, it doesn't mean that the building is safe. The fire department might still be in there doing their investigation. So we will make sure that everyone gets the all clear and is told that it's safe to go back in the building, as it is. So, assembly points. The purpose for these assembly points is to make sure that we can give you guys that all clear. That part's really important. If you go to Tim Hortons instead of your assembly point, unless Tim Hortons happens to be your assembly point, that'd be great. But if you go to Tim Hortons instead of your assembly point, then you don't know if it's safe to go back in the building yet because nobody's giving you that information. It's also just a safe place where we can make sure everyone's together and get the information that we need and follow up with people if it's necessary. Here's an example of an emergency evacuation procedure. So if now would be a good time, we can bring up our answers to our poll. Does everybody know where their assembly point is? That's pretty good, 89%. For the couple of you who aren't sure, look it up, follow the link that Melanie put up, or look for on your floor, look for something that looks just like this. So it'll have your map of your building, the floor you're on. It'll have those stairwells in green and the exits are all listed. So it's showing you all the different ways you can get out of there to safety. If you look in the bottom left corner, it shows your building and also shows your assembly point, where you're going to go. So one other thing to keep in mind for your own personal safety, while you're paying attention to everything that's going on around you, if something pops up, something comes up that's important, even that you feel it's important or you're uncomfortable with whatever's happening, speak up, say something, let someone know, whether you go to HR or campus security or 911. So there's a few pictures up here in the middle. You've got a guy trying to break into a car who knows, maybe it's his car, he locked his keys in his car, it's unfortunate, he's reckoned it's locked with his screwdriver there, but it might be his car. A good call to make would probably be call campus security. The guy at the bottom with the gun in his pocket, a good call to make would probably be 911. We want the guys with the guns showing up for that one. And in the middle, we see what looks like a young lady getting harassed by maybe a couple of colleagues. Again, that's if that's something that doesn't feel right to you, speak up. You don't have to say anything in the moment to the people there if that's not something you're comfortable doing or you don't feel safe doing it. But talk to your boss, talk to your manager, talk to your supervisor, talk to HR. You can call campus security if you're not sure. At the very least, we can give you guidance if we're not necessarily the right department to be talking to for a particular incident. But we'll always be here to help out. That's why we're here. So, active assailant, run, hide, fight. We're going to talk about what to do in the event of an active assailant on campus. All of the information we're giving you right now, comes from the United States, from the FBI methodology, which is that simple concept of run, hide, or fight. It can be used in any environment, not just in the office. It can be used in whether you're vacationing in a hotel or you're at home. It's always applicable. But it's advice, it's practical advice. It's not training. You're not being trained to deal with an active shooter. You're getting practical advice. The onus after that is on you to just be prepared, be mentally prepared, have a plan, be observant, be ready to act in the way that you need to protect yourself. We have a video coming up here. I'm going to try my best to make this work. I know we tried the same video yesterday and it didn't work.
There are many partners who work together to make our campus safe. The likelihood of an active shooter occurrence at the University of Calgary is extremely remote. However, when the unthinkable happens, it's essential to be prepared to act, just like you would in a fire. In the event of an emergency on campus, the UC Emergency app can provide you with timely alerts to help keep you safe. Download UC Emergency from your app store today.
Every second counts. Not sure if that's gunfire. What else is happening? Check for crowd reactions, shouts, screams. Trust your intuition. Sounds like it could be a gun, react as though it is. Planning could save your life. Be familiar with your environment. Knowing your options ahead of time means you can act with a clear mind when fear and adrenaline kick in. Scan and assess your situation. Consider your options. Act. Active shooter situations are unpredictable and evolve quickly. You will need to react fast. If you believe you can escape safely, do so immediately. When you are safe, call 911. There's a shooter on campus. Follow the directions of police. Choose a safe exit. Don't attract the shooter's attention. Protect yourself first before helping others. Find a secure room or space.
Shut the lights.
Turn off the lights. Cover windows.
Go to the line of fire.
Lock the door and barricade it if you can.
Someone's shooting. We're gonna look down, but we're gonna be safe. Don't worry.
Improvise. Stay out of the line of fire. Get under desks or behind tables. Mute your phone. Be quiet. Wait for police to come to you. Turn off the lights. Lock and barricade doors. Stay out of the line of fire. Be quiet.
Please remember, we're not going to be in this.
When you can't get out or hide, your last resort may be to fight.
Turn off the lights. Everybody.
Whether you are alone or with a group, be ready to fight for your life. Commit to aggressive action. Mentally prepare yourself to physically fight. It will be a fight for your life. It's your decision. Disarm and incapacitate the shooter any way you can. Improvise weapons from nearby objects. Commit to an aggressive physical attack. Stop the threat. If you are safe in your hiding place, stay there and let police come to you.
It's the police service. Announce your presence.
Remember, the primary duty of police is to stop the shooter and then tend to casualties.
What we need you to do now is just follow our direction. Everything's gonna be okay. We're gonna get you to exit the room, nice and slowly, one at a time with your hands.
Do whatever you can to get through this. Odds are you will never face the unthinkable. But if you do, keep the odds in your favor. Planning can save your life. Having options empowers you and helps control your fear. Be familiar with your environment. Assess your situation. Make a decision and act. Get out, hide, fight.
We're okay. Oh.
All right, so I've been told that the quality might have been a little poor in the video again. I apologize. The link is in the chat. If you have an opportunity to watch the video, I suggest you do. It's a pretty good video. For everyone who did see the video, it's that choose action over fear. It's an important part. So run, hide, or fight. We're going to talk about those three concepts here. An active assailant, about any individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. In most cases, an active assailant uses firearms. There's no pattern to the method or the selection of their victims. I know there's also been some pretty major instances where vehicles have been used as well, or edged weapons. So they could be using just about anything. The Laloche Community School in Saskatchewan is the last known instance of a active assailant in a school in Canada. Columbine and Virginia Tech are two other very big ones which come to mind. Columbine is one which has changed the way police respond to active assailants on campuses across North America, including in the United States. And Virginia Tech, as we all know, is a horrible tragedy, mostly women who were killed specifically because they were women. So this is a victim selection by the shooter, and we never know what somebody's motives are until it's too late. So everybody needs to be prepared to do whatever they can to stay safe. Some things that we have in place here on campus to make sure we are helping to keep you safe. For one, we have uniformed security. So we have our security patrolling in their vehicles and on foot throughout the buildings. These are professional security professionals, contact professionals. This isn't your McDonald's security. These are people who train regularly. They're trained in all kinds of different things, including medical first response, including arrest control techniques, and most importantly, they're those contact professionals trained in de-escalation. The CCTV, thousands of cameras all over campus. Thing to keep in mind with the CCTV, while it does help to keep you safe, is with thousands of cameras all over campus, and we only have one or two people at any given time, we're able to look at those cameras. Just because there's a camera that's looking at you, it doesn't mean there's a person who is watching. So don't take those cameras as being the end all be all and assume that somebody can see you at any given time. We are here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We're even here on Christmas. And our members are always actively patrolling, and there's extensive security plans and procedures in place for all kinds of different incidents. We also have armed support from our community partners in the Calgary Police Service. So in the event of an active assailant, they're here pretty quick. And in 2017, we did a large joint exercise with the Calgary Police Service, University of Calgary, Alberta Health Services, Emergency Medical Services, and the Calgary Fire Department for an active shooter event we did over at the Olympic Oval. And we had a lot of good takeaways from there, one of which we're going to talk about in the second part of our presentation. We talk about the Stop the Bleed program. The university makes an effort to remain diplomatically neutral, so hopefully that is something which is going to reduce the likelihood of us being a target. And we have, of course, our own emergency management department here. They have plans and procedures, building specific plans. Again, go and look at those. The link should be in the chat from earlier. And awareness and preparedness training and presentations. It's one of the things you're going through right now. So the simple concept of run, hide, fight, they all revolve around the same concept of survive. In the event of an active assailant, that is your ultimate goal. You need to survive. You need to do what it takes to survive. And at any given time, you might be here on campus one day, could be here the next day, you could be here the next day. It's a big campus. Everything's very different, different buildings, different layouts. Pay attention to your surroundings, wherever you are, wherever you're going to be for the day. Know your emergency exits, know where the fire extinguishers are, know where the pull stations for the fire alarms are. And know what the hazards are in your location. Be prepared for those particular hazards. And in the event that you run, you need to know where you are, where you're running to, what you're running away from. And the key is just go. As soon as you recognize that there's a threat, there's something to run away from, just go. Don't wait for that direction. Don't wait for somebody else to tell you, it's time to leave. Be that leader, be the one that everyone else sees, and they will follow you. So that situational awareness, that'll help you recognize the signs that things are going bad. If you hear gunshots, if you hear yelling, if you hear screaming, if you hear anything that sounds like violence, go, run away. That is absolutely your best option. If you can get away to safety, that's what you need to do first and foremost. Make a plan in your head. You should already have a plan in your head of how you're going to get out, but if you don't, make a plan and act on it. Just go. Move quickly. Consider what kind of cover you have as you're running. If you're running through a big open field, there's nothing there to protect you. If you're running behind, say, a concrete wall, you're fairly safe. And recognize the different kinds of cover. So if you're hiding behind, say, a bush or a shrub or a curtain wall or anything like that, those sorts of things that bullets and shrapnel can pass through. And they're not necessarily going to protect you, but what they will do is they will hide you from the assailant. So they're better than nothing, but if you can get behind what's called hard cover, and it'll protect you from those explosions or bullets or anything like that, do that. Help others escape if you can. And one key thing here, those assembly points that we were just harping on, telling you go to your assembly point when you have to evacuate, do not go to your assembly point if you are running away from an active assailant. That's one of the tactics an active assailant might use, would be to pull a fire alarm, make sure everyone gets to that assembly point. So stay away from those assembly points in the event of an active assailant. If you can't run, your next best option is to hide. Ideally, you want to hide in a closed room that you can lock the door, that doesn't have any windows. That's not always possible. So if you need to barricade a door shut, do it. But whatever you can do to hide, make it a good hiding place. Keep in mind that hard cover versus soft cover. Again, if you can get behind something solid that the bad guys can't shoot through, that's better. But if the best you can do is to hide behind a curtain wall, then that's what you need to do. As soon as you're hiding, silence your phone. If you have a safe opportunity to pick up your phone and call 911, you can do that. If you have information to pass on to 911 or to campus security, you can do that. But if you're in hiding, your best thing you can do is stay quiet and stay safe. Lower your profile. What that means is get down as low and small as possible. If there's an explosion or if there's gunfire and you're standing up and you're taking up a lot of room and you're creating a big profile, then the chances of you being hit by either an intentional bullet or a stray bullet or a stray piece of shrapnel are a lot higher than if you make that small profile, you shrink that profile. So if you can lay down flat on the ground, that's your best option. And remain as quiet as you can. I got ahead of myself. We already covered this stuff here. One thing, stay off social media while you're hiding. We don't want the bad guys being able to look you up on Facebook and know where you're hiding. Your last option is to fight. The possibility exists that you might need to meet violence with violence. This is obviously a last resort. No one is ever going to advocate for you to go chasing down the gunman and trying to find them and beating them up. But if you find yourself in a closed, confined space you're trying to hide, and that active assailant comes in and they're armed and there's no escape, your last best option is to fight and understand that this is going to be a fight for your life. You need to be able to commit to that fight. Like they said in the video, commit to a violent attack or whatever it was that they said, but you will need to be able to meet that violence with violence. And if there's 10 people in the room and 10 people can pile on this assailant as he comes in the door, then that's going to be better than one-on-one. But you need to be prepared both mentally and physically to step up if that's what needs to happen. So while you're hiding, take a look around, pay attention to what's in the room, know your surroundings. If you can find anything you can use as a weapon, arm yourself and be ready. When emergency responders arrive, the police are going to be the first ones in the building. And the thing to keep in mind with the police is they have one goal, and that is to neutralize the threat. They're going after the gunman. What that means is if somebody's lying on the ground and bleeding, they're going to walk right over top of them and keep moving. So we're going to get into things we can do to help protect people there. But know that the police are going to go directly after that assailant as they come in. If the police knock on the door and say, hey, it's the police, come on out, maybe don't. It might not be the police. When it's time, the police are going to come through. They're going to have keys to the buildings. They're going to have maybe security with them. And unless you actually see that uniformed policeman come into the room, you don't know that it's police or not. The other thing is those intercom systems, those notification systems, campus security from our security operations center, we can notify you from there over the intercom that it's safe and it's time to come out. So those are always going to be options that can happen. In the meantime, what you need to do is remain calm. If you're given directions by any first responders, you need to follow those instructions. Keep your hands visible. Don't make quick movements around the police. Don't run towards the police. The police are probably on edge. There's people out there with guns who are shooting the place up, and they have guns too. So we don't want to be the ones running at them, and they have to make that question, that decision of, are you a threat to them or not? So just follow the directions, keep your hands where they can see them, and don't run towards them or anyone. And expect that you may very well be treated as a suspect when you come out of the building. They don't know that you didn't have anything to do with it off the bat. And they're going to be questioning everyone to make sure that they've got this threat neutralized. It's not a personal thing. It's not about any one person. It's about everyone. And they want to make sure everyone is safe by questioning everyone. And after you arrive in a safe location, debriefing, counseling, all those things will be made available either by Calgary Police or by the University of Calgary. So the UC emergency app. I think Melanie's going to be throwing up a link in the chat again for the UC emergency app. Please go ahead and follow that. We're going to get into it in a moment, but there's other ways that we can get a hold of you as well. So there's the app. We also have emergency desktop. So if you ever notice while you're working away in your desktop, you get a pop-up notifying you of some kind of a danger, be it maybe a gas leak or a chemical leak or a fire or an active assailant. That's actually coming from our security operations center. Pay attention to that pop-up and follow the directions that are on it. There's also security alerts for less urgent things. Campus security will put out security alerts if we have a history of a creeper coming around campus doing things which are untoward. They're not supposed to be happening. We will let the community know if we believe there's any threat to the community. So the security alerts will come out to anyone with a UCalgary email address. When you receive a security alert in your email, open it up, read it, pay attention, and do what it is you need to do to keep yourself safe. Also the mass notification system we talked about. So every building should have a mass notification system. We can come over the PA for the building and tell you all about what's going on. The UC emergency app, again, click that link in the chat and follow the directions. You can just go to your app store, look up UC emergency, and you should have it come up for the University of Calgary emergency through an app called Alertus. And there's a video that doesn't work. Hang on, let's see if it is. One more video. And everyone thought that demolished Swan Mall was just to build a new building. It was actually a meteor that hit there. Who knew? Here's your instructions on how to get the app. Take a picture of this screen, or again, that's on the emergency management webpage. That's on the link in the chat. Here's the instructions. You're gonna need those codes, that UCEM 68035 code and that PIN code of 25573 to get all set up on the app for University of Calgary. So Alertus is a fairly big program. Other campuses use it. This is the information you need for the University of Calgary notifications. And we have a few other resources available. Please take a screenshot of this one. Some very important phone numbers, some people you can reach out to. There is a student at risk team. If you are worried about a student, you can reach out to the student at risk team, or you can reach out to campus security, or you can reach out to the student wellness center. They're all good options. Student wellness center is there available for medical health, mental health help, anything involving student wellness. We also have staff wellness. Same idea. They're there to offer assistance. We have a mental health consultant with staff wellness. Her name is Amanda Habik, and she is incredible. So please reach out to her if you feel the need, as well as any other health, wellness, or psychological supports for staff. We have Safe Walk and campus security and the student medical response team. All three can be reached through that same number there, 220-5333, whatever it is you need. 911 for police, fire, and EMS. It's an important number to know. Hopefully you already have that one in your phone. Otherwise, all these other numbers, please take a screenshot, put them in your phone. Sexual violence support advocate. It's a confidential support. If you have been the victim of sexual violence, or perhaps you're worried about someone else who you think might have been the victim of sexual violence, you can reach out. That number is there for you. Again, confidential. And this confidence line, I'm terribly sorry. Again, this is from emergency management, put together this presentation. I'm not sure what this confidence line is. I might have to Google that and let you guys know later. A few more important numbers, 911, obviously that's the big one. There's some resources here from Calgary Emergency Management. You can go online and access some disaster preparedness information. Again, take a screenshot of this one. Please put some of these numbers into your phones. Income support contact center, bullying prevention, child abuse hotline, family violence hotline, occupational health and safety, health link at 811 for health advice. There's also, a lot of people aren't aware of 211 here in Alberta. It's kind of a clearinghouse for all the resources. If you know you need a resource and you don't know what resource it is you need or how to reach them, call 211 and they will help you out. That's what all boils down to. Be aware of your surroundings. Be prepared and have a plan. Be ready to take action to protect yourself. So always pay attention. Have that plan. Now I'm going to pop into the Q&A here just for a moment before we move on to the next presentation. Okay, I think the only question we have up right now is in regards to the video. Melanie's been kind enough to answer that one. And we have these links again in the chat. Go into the chat, hit these links, copy these links, and follow them. Now, we don't have any other questions before we move on. We move on to part 2. The opioids and bleeding. So we're going to talk about the Stop the Bleed program and some opioid awareness. So the Stop the Bleed program, we're going to talk about public access bleeding control kits and training that's available. And for opioids and naloxone, we're going to talk about what opioids are, and we're going to talk about the public health crisis, which is ongoing and has been ongoing for some time now. And we're going to talk about what to do to respond to an overdose. Starting with the Stop the Bleed program. We talked about that joint exercise we did in 2017 with Calgary Police, EMS, Calgary Fire, and the University of Calgary. One of our big takeaways here at the university was that we didn't have anything available for people who were there at the scene at the time of the injuring who wanted to help, be it in the form of training or physical hard resources. So we looked into what we could do for our community. And what we fell on was something called the Hartford Consensus. So in 2012, after the Sandy Hook massacre in the United States, the Obama administration commissioned the American College of Surgeons to form the National Committee on Trauma, which included, of course, the American College of Surgeons and the FBI and the military, the College of Emergency Military Medicine, I believe they were called. Anyway, a whole pile of subject matter experts. And what they came together was called the Hartford Consensus. And the big focus of the Hartford Consensus is on that early hemorrhage control. And that's the part that we're doing for our community here. Something for everyone to know, uncontrolled bleeding is the #1 cause of preventable death in trauma. There's a little quote here from the Hartford Consensus, and what it all boils down to is the person who's there when somebody gets hurt and is willing to step up and help is most often that line between life and death for someone with uncontrolled bleeding. A deadly arterial bleed, a person can bleed out in 3 minutes. Campus security might take us 2 to 3 minutes to respond. EMS might take 15 minutes to respond. So that person who's there from the beginning and is ready, willing, and able to help, they're the ones that make the difference. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dave Sanders. Dave Sanders was a coach in Columbine High School. And on that fateful day that the shooting started in Columbine High School, Dave Sanders became enshrined as a hero. He was in the cafeteria at the time the shooting started, along with a couple of caretakers and a whole bunch of students. And him and those 2 caretakers ushered those students out to safety, made sure they all got out of there, and they did. And Dave was at the back of the crowd on the way out of that cafeteria. Dave took 3 bullets to the back. The shooter had to stop and reload his weapon, which gave Dave an opportunity to get away. Dave went and he found himself in a science lab. He managed to get into a science lab and close and lock the door. He locked himself in there to stay safe from these shooters. Once he was in there, he realized he was not alone. He was there with a couple of colleagues and a few students. And Dave was bleeding to death out his back. Dave spent a couple hours on that floor bleeding out. There was one student in there who was an Eagle, something akin to sort of like a Boy Scout. He was trained in first aid and he did everything he could to control the bleeding, but it wasn't quite enough. You see that sign on the right-hand side, 1 bleeding to death. Somebody had the good sense to write that down because they could see the TAC team outside the school getting ready to come in. They put that up in the window in the hopes that somebody would see it and they would come and help. Eventually, the TAC team did get to that room. They cleared that room and they moved on. And Dave was still barely hanging on to life at that time. By the time the paramedics got up to the room, Dave Sanders had passed away. Part of the reason why we're doing this Stop the Bleed program. We want to make sure that everyone in our community is aware of how they can help. You've heard the if you see something, say something. Well, now it's if you see something, do something. It's the difference between being a victim or a responder. If you see somebody bleeding out, there's a few things you can do. One is just put that direct pressure on there. One is apply a tourniquet. The kits are available all over campus. More importantly, there's training available to everyone. In the Hartford Consensus, they talk about 3 different levels of responders. There's the immediate responders. That's everyone who's there at the time of wounding. Professional first responders. It's anyone who's trained and equipped and has an expectation to respond. So police, fire, EMS, and by this definition, that'd even be campus security or the peace officers on transit, if that's where you happen to be. Anyone who's trained and equipped and has an expectation to respond. And then there's the trauma professionals. That's the doctors, the nurses, the surgeons, the techs, everyone in the hospital. So we focused in the university primarily on the immediate and professional first responders and making sure everyone is equipped and trained. So here's the 4 basic concepts that we try and follow with our program. That concept that those initial responders are key, they're critical in making sure that people are surviving. Putting out the education programs. So that's the Stop the Bleed training, which you can sign up for. And the equipment, which you can find anywhere where there's an AED on campus. Melanie, I think you have a link you can post in the chat for where to find the nearest AED to you. And I think maybe we might have a poll that we can put up for, do you know where your nearest AED is to you? And the last piece on this list is recognize an active shooter event. The main message still needs to be that run, hide, fight. You need to protect yourself first. If you end up as another casualty, you can no longer help anyone. And that's just one more person that needs to be helped. So protect yourself first and foremost. Okay, these bleeding control kits you can find around campus. There's one in every AED kit on campus, and they look similar to this. There's a couple of bleeding kits inside for the smaller kits, enough to go to 2 different people who are bleeding out. We'll talk about what's inside those kits in a moment. And here's a little map of everywhere where you might find them on campus. Go to the link that Melanie's putting into the chat there. There's a list of nearly 100 AEDs on campus. This kind of a high level map. It's not really telling you exactly where to go. It's just helping give the idea that they are everywhere. Our larger kits, we've placed larger bleeding control kits in areas where we know large crowds will gather. Places like the McEwen Student Center, it's right by Kobe Beef, beside the SU office and across from the campus security office. There's one in TFDL on the ground floor at the information desk. There's one in the Olympic Oval and Kinesiology Link on the 2nd floor, right where everyone goes in for convocations or sporting events. There's one in the Health Sciences Center right by the Hippocrates statue. There's one in Science Theaters by the Zipper. There's one in the Engineering G block in the main concourse area. There's one in University Theaters, one in Earth Sciences, and one in the Dining Center, all the main concourses. So these things are all over the place. Pay attention where the nearest one is to you. And inside these kits, be it the big kits or the little kits, this is what you're going to find. The big kits have 8 of these bleeding control packets. The smaller kits have 2. And in one of those packets, you will find what's called a combat application tourniquet. They're really simple, really easy to use. And if you take the Stop the Bleed training, we will teach you how. There's emergency trauma dressings, compressed gauze for wound packing, nitrile gloves, scissors, permanent marker for marking the time of application on your tourniquet, and instructions. Please don't rely on those instructions. Please take the training. If you do step up to take the Stop the Bleed training, sign up for training, you will take a 2-hour Stop the Bleed course. I'll give you a skills approach to rapid trauma survey. So that's that checking a person out from head to toe and making sure you know exactly how to find all of the holes that are in the person that aren't supposed to be there. You'll learn how to apply direct pressure, indirect pressure, and digital pressure. So 3 different kinds of pressure that can be used to treat a deadly bleed or to stop a deadly bleed. You'll learn about wound packing, about tourniquets, how to apply the tourniquets you'll find in the kits as well as improvised tourniquets. And you'll learn some basic airway management skills. As you can see from one of the pictures, the one in the bottom in the center, this training does use simulated wounds and simulated blood, and it can be a little gross and gory. So something to keep in mind when you're deciding whether or not to sign up for one of these. Before we move on, I'm not seeing any questions up in the Q&A here for Stop the Bleed, so I'll give people a moment if there's any questions. I'll pop up there. Okay, if you do have questions about the stop the bleed, go ahead, put them in the Q&A. We will get to them after the opioids portion here. Now we're going to talk briefly about opioids, about the current crisis, and about how you can help respond. So an opioid is either a synthetic or natural chemical that bonds to the opioid receptors in your brain and in your central nervous system, and create euphoria, decreased heart rate, decreased respiration rate, drowsiness, slow slurred speech, constricted pupils. That one's fairly important. Remember that one, constricted pupils. We'll talk about why that one's important in a moment. And opioids are typically meant for pain management, but they're sometimes often also used in cough control and diarrhea control, and also in treating addiction to other opioids. So opioids are actually prescribed by physicians for various things. They're not all, however, made in these carefully controlled labs and used as medications. So fentanyl, it is something that you can get in your hospital or from your doctor for different reasons. It's a very powerful opioid, and it is currently the leading cause of death from opioid overdoses. It's about 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine. Other types of opioids are oxycodone, morphine, hydromorphone, fentanyl, codeine, heroin, methadone. So a lot of those are things you will find in various medications that can be prescribed by a physician. If your physician prescribes you heroin, I would suggest maybe get a second opinion and a different physician, but I'm not a doctor, so who knows. And they can come in lots of different forms, be it tablets or capsules, syrups, liquids for injection, nose sprays. We're going to talk about one particular nose spray in a little bit here. Skin patches, suppositories, basically any way you can think of getting something inside your body. That's a route of travel for an opioid. Different routes have different effects. Here's a fairly powerful picture. See the ruler on the right-hand side there. You're looking at heroin versus fentanyl for a lethal dose. A lethal dose of fentanyl is fairly small. It doesn't take much. So you can see why something which is cooked up in somebody's bathroom using a coffee grinder, it might be pretty easy to get the dose off and make a mistake and put just a little bit too much into one pill. There's also carfentanil. We did have a crisis in Calgary a couple of years back with carfentanil. It's still around, but not to the same extent as it was. It is very deadly stuff. It's significantly more powerful than fentanyl, about 100 times more powerful than fentanyl. It's used in large animal tranquilizers. Probably not good for human use. It's not licensed for human use. And an amount the size of a grain of sand is enough to be lethal. Now, a little caveat here, the amount the size of a grain of sand, that's concentrated carfentanil. So if, say there's pills that contain carfentanil, and there's a little piece of that pill the size of a grain of sand, that's not necessarily a lethal dose. It's a lethal dose of concentrated carfentanil. It's about the size of a grain of sand. So we're going to talk about the chocolate chip cookie effect. I love these chocolate chip cookies. The one on the right is my favorite. My mom bakes chocolate chip cookies. That's the one I hope I get when I reach into the jar, the one that has just way too many chocolate chips. And it's delicious, and it's like hitting the jackpot when you pull it out. But you might also reach in, you might pull out that cookie on the left-hand side, the one that doesn't have quite enough chocolate chips. Same idea for opioids. If you're taking opioid pills that are cooked up in a bathroom somewhere using a coffee grinder to mix it, you might get that pill that doesn't have quite enough fentanyl in it to have the effect that you need. Or you might get that one pill that's on the right-hand side there that has a lethal dose in a single pill. Somebody doesn't necessarily know what they're getting. Or you might get two kids going to a rave and they're taking some ecstasy and it's laced with fentanyl, and they cut one pill in half and share it between them, and one of them doesn't even get high. The other one will overdose. This is the problem when these medications aren't being made in controlled labs with quality controls in place. We don't know what we're getting. Which is what leads us to our crisis here in Alberta and in Canada and in Calgary. In Alberta, 1,152 people died from accidental opioid overdoses in 2020. Give that a minute to sink in for people. There's a lot of people who died in the year 2020. The first quarter of 2021, an average of 4 people a day have died from opioid overdoses. It's all according to the Alberta Substance Use Surveillance System, which anyone can go online and access. It's a little bit disturbing to look at. Things have not been getting better. Starting in about 2017, things did start to get better. Our opioid crisis was improving. The fatality rates were down. We had our safe injection sites. We had our Naloxone kits. And then something happened around March of 2020. We had our first case of COVID-19. And a lot changed for a lot of people, whether it's safe injection sites closing down or safe consumption sites, closing down, or other things which have impacted people's lives and their safety. But as you can see, the rate of opioid poisoning deaths has drastically increased ever since the start of COVID-19. We have, however, mostly stopped hearing about it in the media. This epidemic is still happening. This is the epidemic within a pandemic. It's still happening. We just aren't hearing about it. Most people feel safe from this particular epidemic because they think, well, it's not contagious. It's not something I can get. I regret to be the one to tell you that anyone, absolutely anyone, is susceptible to getting a substance use disorder. Whether it's from prescribed medications, which maybe you've just taken for just a little bit too long, or drastic life events, which just lead you down the wrong path and get you to make just one or two choices, which lead you to having that substance use disorder. Anyone is susceptible. And there are people with substance use disorders that walking around amongst us in our community who are managing those disorders quite well, and you wouldn't even know, whether they're family members or colleagues or students, and they might be right there with you for large parts of the day. You would never even know. And for that reason, being prepared to deal with an opioid overdose is important for everyone, whether you think you have somebody in your life or not who has that substance use disorder. The odds are very high that you do. Unfortunately, the way things have been reported has changed since 2018. So the last time this level of data was available to us was in 2018. So this is when these statistics are from. You can see the little blue dots on the screen with the numbers in them. They're the number of fatalities in that particular neighborhood over that particular period of time from January 1st, 2018 to September 30th, 2018. You'll notice where the University of Calgary is there are no blue circles, no little numbers. And today in 2021, that is still the case. We have not had a fatality on campus from opioid overdose. We have had more than one close call, but no actual fatalities. So we're doing okay right now. The one closest call that we've had was a person who was not from our community who'd come onto campus. That person had gone into a private bathroom and locked himself in, where he went to consume opioids, and he overdosed. And the only reason that person is still alive today is because we had a member of our community who had the good sense to recognize that this person probably doesn't belong, maybe shouldn't have been going and locking themselves in there for a long time, and maybe it's a good idea to tell someone. So they called campus security. And when our members attended, the person was on the floor, they were unconscious, unresponsive, and not breathing. Thankfully, that member of the community that called at just the right time, because campus security was able to ventilate that person, provide them with that thing which is necessary for all of us to live, oxygen, and they were able to provide them with naloxone. That person was alive and well before EMS even showed up on campus. That's the closest we've come on campus, thankfully. Thankfully, mostly to the vigilance of our community and the fact that we're in a community where people take care of each other and people are willing to step up and speak up when they need to. So, if you see what you think is an opioid overdose, here's some things you can see to recognize that. A person is unconscious, unresponsive, breathing slow or erratic, or not breathing at all. Their body is limp, their fingernails or lips are blue. It means they're not getting enough oxygenated blood. Skin is cold and clammy. Their pulse is slow and erratic or not there at all. They're making choking sounds or gurgling sounds or snoring. Agonal respirations, something we call guppy breathing. It's those irregular gasping breaths that a person starts to have when they're in cardiac arrest. Or vomiting or seizures. Or, as I said early on, pay attention to that tiny pupils one, or their pupils are tiny. See, all of these other signs and symptoms outside of the pupils are signs and symptoms of alcohol poisoning, as well as an opioid overdose. So those tiny pupils are a telltale sign. If that's what you're seeing, there's a good chance it's an opioid overdose. If you suspect it's an opioid overdose, you need to step up and take action. The most important thing you can do is maintain their airway, do CPR, or ventilate if that's the level you're trained to. If you don't have CPR training, you can look at active living. Go to the active living website for the University of Calgary. And there's first aid and CPR training through the Canadian Red Cross. Very good instructors there. I encourage anyone, step up, take the training, be ready. But the number one most important thing for a person with an opioid overdose is that we are making sure they're breathing. If they're not breathing for themselves, we're breathing for them. That's CPR and airway management. So if you do take that Red Cross first aid course, this is what they're going to tell you. Check, call, care. Check first. That's check the scene, check the person. Make sure that you understand what's happening. Make sure the scene is safe for yourself and you've checked for those symptoms we just talked about. If you think it's an opioid overdose, you're going to act. Even if you don't, if they're not breathing, you're going to make that call. Call 911. If person's not breathing, 911 is the number one number to go to. But again, sometimes situations are fluid. Maybe that's not a good option for you. Maybe you don't have a cell phone available. You can call out for help. You can pick up a classroom phone and push number 1. That'll bring you to campus security. You can hit an intercom at the front of any building. That'll bring you to campus security. You can hit the phone button inside of any elevator. That'll bring you to campus security. You can hit any help phone. That'll bring you to campus security. There's lots of options. Just make sure help is on the way. Call for help. And that last piece is care. Again, if you know CPR, step up and do it. If you don't know CPR, go to Active Living, sign up for a Red Cross first aid course. And then there's the AEDs. Remember where your AEDs are. If you can send someone to get an AED, tell them exactly where it is. It might be needed. Now, this is the last part of how to act for a opioid overdose, the administration of naloxone. So naloxone, also sold under the brand name of Narcan. So naloxone is to Narcan as acetaminophen is to Tylenol, or as ibuprofen is to Advil. So naloxone and Narcan are the same thing. And it's a medication used to block the effects of an opioid. Naloxone is technically itself an opioid because it bonds with your opioid receptors, just like an active opioid. The only difference is it doesn't have any effect on your central nervous system once it's there. So you can think of naloxone like a stronger magnet, and it comes in and It'll knock those existing opioids out of those opioid receptors, and it'll sit inside that receptor and just block anything else from getting in there. That's how it's protecting a person. It's safe and effective. There are no major side effects you need to be worried about. The only people that can't take naloxone are people who are allergic to naloxone. And I'm not sure anybody out there knows that they're allergic to naloxone. I could be wrong. It's a safe and effective antidote, and it will reverse those overdose symptoms. So that not breathing, that's the big thing. That's the thing that kills people with an opioid overdose. It's that not breathing part. And it comes in a nasal spray or an intramuscular injection or an intravenous. The intranasal spray, we have that here at Campus Security. The fire department carries the nasal spray. The intramuscular injections are the common ones you're going to see everywhere. They look just like this, and they are 100% free, and anyone can go and get them. It's a take-home naloxone kit, free of charge anywhere in Alberta. You can get them here at the university through staff wellness. I know you used to be able to get them through the wellness center. I'm sorry, I don't know for sure whether or not you still can, but look at kits are available from any pharmacy as well, including the pharmacy here on campus, Varsity Drugs in the McEwen Student Center. You can go to your family doctor, you can go to any pharmacy, just about, and ask for one of these kits. If you go to staff wellness, I know they are very good up there, and they will give you the training you need to go along with these kits. There's no judgment. Like we were saying earlier, anyone is susceptible to a substance use disorder, an opioid-based substance use disorder. And you don't need to have that substance use disorder to go get one of these kits. You just need to understand, to recognize that there is a high likelihood that there is someone in your life who might have that opioid-based substance use disorder. So when you administer naloxone, it's 2 to 5 minutes for that to take effect. So understand that you're going to give that naloxone, and that person's not going to immediately jump up. It's going to take maybe a couple minutes. And while you're waiting, if that person's not breathing, without that oxygen that we all need to live, their brain is slowly dying. So again, the single most important thing we can be doing for the person is making sure they're breathing or breathing for them by doing that CPR. And it'll last about 30 minutes to 120 minutes. There are opioids out there which last longer than the naloxone. It is theoretically possible that once the naloxone wears off, a person can re-overdose on the opioids that are already in their system. Not aware of any cases where that's happened. And I don't think there's a lot of research that has identified cases where that happened, but it is theoretically possible. So just be prepared for that, that if somebody gets naloxone for an overdose, they still need to go to a hospital. They still need to seek professional medical treatment, even though they're feeling better in that moment. And then we want to continue to monitor that person to make sure that they don't stop breathing again. And if we need to, we can give a second dose of naloxone. After that 2 to 5 minutes has gone by, if they're still not breathing or not breathing well, we can give them that second dose of naloxone. So the only thing more tragic than a death is a death that could have been prevented. Go up here and look in the Q&A. That is it for our second presentation. And we've got 15 minutes for questions. Oh, the link for naloxone training is not active. The link takes you to Sign Up Genius. I'm not sure what that is. I will bring that up with our staff wellness department. I'm not sure where we're at with our naloxone training right now. Oh, is it possible for a person who helps to be exposed to opioids? So again, we're talking about a theoretical possibility here. There's been lots of reported cases of first responders being exposed to opioids. In many of those cases, it's been a psychological effect on the person. That doesn't mean it's been fake or not a real effect, but it's not an opioid overdose that's happening. It's that intense fear from the opioids, which has been impacting them. And for the ones who have been affected by the opioids, again, we're talking about first responders who are going into opioid labs and getting, a face full of concentrated opioid powders. If you're doing CPR on a person who is overdosed on opioids, those opioids are inside that person. So you're not at risk. If that person is covered in opioids, maybe powder all over their face, then you need to take steps to protect yourself, which just means don't get it on you and don't get it in your mucous membranes. And those mucous membranes are key because you get opioids in your skin, that transdermal transportation of opioids through your skin is actually very slow. We have, they're called transdermal patches they use in hospitals, usually used for palliative care. And there's enough opioids in one of those patches for a person to overdose, but they'll put it on someone because it will slowly absorb through the skin over a period of 72 hours. So if you get it on your skin, you're still safe. You brush it off, wash your hands. And if you are worried you've been exposed, just make sure you speak up and you let the responders know, and you can be assessed and monitored, and you should be safe. But the risk is very low. And like I said, if the opioids are inside the person, they're not a threat to you. I hope that answers the question. I'm not seeing any other new questions coming up. We do have a few more minutes to go over. There is, I'm going to see if I can find it in the chat here. There's more sessions coming up. They're going to be posted into the chat. Oh, here we are. All right, Shannon is posting them right now in the chat. For anyone who's not looking in the chat, the sessions that are coming up. Tomorrow, we have what is languishing and why is it important? And that's going to be from noon till 1. Please get in there and sign up. Risk tolerance, 10 influencing factors of risk acceptance. That is also tomorrow from 1 till 2. Please get in there and sign up. And psychological hygiene is ending it all off, rounding it off on Friday from noon till 1. So get in there, follow the links, sign up for the coming courses. Sending us a link to the presentation after. I think we can make this presentation available, and I think this is being recorded. I don't know if Jessica or Shannon can step in there and answer on how to go about finding that recording.
We will be emailing everyone after the event with links to the recording.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon.
No trouble.
All right. Well, we've got 10 minutes left. I was worried it was going to go over because when I practiced this, it took me 1 hour and 45 minutes rather than 1 hour and a half. If there's any further questions, I'm going to be sitting here. Otherwise, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for logging in, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today and learning ways to help keep yourself and your community safe.